Hello, welcome back. Next installment of Advanced English Conversation. We're talking some more about language myths. So there's another kind of section or page on your handout about language myths. And the first question, we talked about this. You can review this and why that is. And that's about left brain, right brain stuff and how it's not really true. So just to review different aspects of, well, while for most people grammar might be done in the left hemisphere, there are some grammar functions that are on the right. But if you're left-handed, then it's the reverse. Your grammar is done in the right. Sound structure, sound system, for most people done in the left, but there are aspects of sound, how sound carries meaning, like intonation, that's done in the right side. Other aspects of language like meaning and metaphors and idioms and vocabulary, it's done in different parts of the brain. Music, math, and other things are done in different parts of the brain. So what you've heard about left brain, right brain stuff is not true. There are differences, but they're really complex and they're smaller or more minor differences or very complex differences. It's quite different than what you've heard. Next topic to talk about. Have you heard this claim? Eskimos have 20 words for snow or 100 or 300 words for snow in their language because in their culture, well, snow is really important. So they have a lot of words for snow in their culture. So they have 300 words. And this is a popular claim, and it became a popular claim a long time ago because of a certain theory in linguistics that says that your environment or your culture shape your language or even determine it, and your language shapes or even determines how you think and how you can express yourself and even maybe what you can communicate about. Do you think this claim is true? The Eskimo snow word claim, or even the idea that environment, culture, language, and how you think really determine each other or greatly shape each other? You may have come across this claim in a class, perhaps. What do you think about this? Is this stuff true? Pause the video and discuss. Okay, we're back. Did you see, well actually, did you see the movie Arrival a couple of years ago? It depended on, the plot depended upon this kind of idea, this kind of claim. Brilliant movie, by the way. You should see it. If you haven't seen Arrival, you have to see it. I'm actually going to make you pause and think before I get to the answer. Pause and think about this. Is there any plausibility to how this would work in the movie? In the movie, if you don't know the plot, basically aliens establish contact with humans, and the aliens teach some humans their language, and the aliens have an ability to kind of see the future. And so by learning their language, the main character in the movie starts to be able to see the future, and see the future as if it's her past. I don't want to spoil too much for you. It's a great movie. But do you think that something like that could happen? Is it plausible? Is it credible? Pause the video and discuss. Do you think the idea that learning a language from an alien race that can see the future, they can think about the future in the same way as the present and the past, would this affect how we could see the future? How we perceive time? Pause the video and discuss this. Okay, brilliant movie. It's amazingly done. It does, but you have to kind of suspend belief. It's based on a linguistic theory that most linguists don't believe today. And also the idea that just learning a new language, an alien language, it's not going to change how you affect time as dramatically as in the movie, because in order to perceive time in such a fundamentally different way, you would have to kind of rewrite your brain and how your brain works. And the language is not going to do that. But it's an absolutely brilliant movie. You should see it anyway. All right. It's not exactly true that the Eskimos have all these words for snow. First of all, one red flag, kind of a sign something's wrong. When people say this, they use the word Eskimo. Is that what they call themselves? No, they don't like that word. They do not like that word. To them, it's kind of a put-down word because they call themselves Inuit. That is the proper term that for them. It's what they call themselves. They are Inuit, not Eskimo. So that's one red flag. Secondly, they have in their language one basic word for snow, just as we do. And I mean basic words. A basic word for snow. Yes, they have other words for snow-related things, and that's not surprising. But hey, we do in English. If we can talk about a snowstorm, we can talk about snow flurries, little light snow that's kind of like coming down very slowly. That's a flurry. F-L-U-R-R-Y, flurry, snow flurries. We can talk about snowflakes and snowballs and snowmen. And people say, oh, the Eskimos have all these different words for snow. They have words for snow as a building material. Yeah, igloo. What's different? It's snow. It's not snow itself. It's a building or building material. Oh, they have words for snow that's partly melted and watery. Yeah, we do too. It's called slush, and so on. So yes, they have a lot of snow-related words, and that is not interesting. If you work with colors as an artist, you know a lot of color terms, but that's different from basic terms. How many basic color words do we have in English? Wait, pause the video for a minute. Think about this. Basic terms. So basic term, it's everyday vocabulary word. Think about color terms. What are the basic color words of English? How many? Or Korean also. How many are there? Is it very different between English and Korean? So basic color term would be, it's a word that's commonly used, a word that you learned as a child in the language, if you learn the language as a child, or one of the first words you learn in the language. The word primarily is a color word. Its meaning is primarily a color. So yeah, kiwi can be a color, but it's primarily a fruit. You can say banana yellow, but it's mainly a fruit, using a different word to describe a color. But yellow is a basic term. It's a common everyday word. It's a word you first learn when you learn the language. And it is primarily a color. It doesn't have another primary meaning. Orange is, by the way, kind of iffy. It's commonly a fruit and a color, kind of 50-50, debatable. But anyway, pause the video and think about this. What are basic color words in English? How many are there? Okay, you probably came out with about a dozen. There are about a dozen for Korean. In many languages, at least languages that are familiar to us, there's usually about a dozen, maybe a few more, a few less. So, you know, the black, white, gray, colors of the rainbow like red, orange, yellow, blue, green, purple, and so on. Basic color terms, maybe pink, gold and silver maybe, but those are also metal terms. Similar story for Korean, about a dozen basic color words. Now, you may have heard of cultures where they have like fewer color words. Does that mean that they can't think of or conceptualize other colors? Like something that's, so a lot of cultures have one word for blue and green. Does that mean they can't see different colors, like things that are in between blue and green? Yeah, here's some, we can talk about different, in English, we have blue and green. We don't have basic words for different, like these different, you know, shades of blue and green, or something that's in between blue and green, a mix of blue and green, we call teal. That's not an everyday color, it's not an everyday word, but we have the word teal, T-E-A-L, for blue-green, the blue-green color. And it's actually the name of a duck, which became a color word. It was borrowed as a color word. So yes, we can develop non-basic words to describe thousands of different colors. So you have about a dozen color words. It doesn't mean that as an English speaker I'm limited to perceiving a dozen different colors. Each of us can perceive thousands and thousands of colors. And if we have to, if we're doing art or web design, we can learn specialized color terms like teal, aqua, indigo, Navajo white, and magenta, and maroon, and so on, and crimson red. So yes, Eskimos have Inuit have one basic word for snow, and they have a lot of snow-related words because obviously it's important to them, but these are kind of derived words, non-basic words for snow-related and cold weather-related ideas and such. If you raise dogs, you know a lot of dog terminology, specialized dog terms that other people don't know. If you study photography, you know a lot of photography terms, and so on. If you study biology, you know a lot of biology words. So claiming that Inuit have a lot of snow-related words, big deal. It's not interesting. The truth is they have one basic word for snow in their language. One basic word, just like English, snow, just like other languages. So this claim is false. It's connected to, it became popular because of there was a controversial theory. It's now controversial in linguistics and anthropology that claimed that maybe what you can think about is either influenced by or even determined by what your language can express, and that in turn might be influenced or determined by your culture. And it's kind of a controversial claim. The claim that it's one determines the other, linguists today do not accept that. It's kind of a false idea. That was a false idea, as C on your handout says. It was made by an unqualified scholar who wasn't really a properly trained linguist. He made this claim. Didn't know what he was talking about. He made up these wrong claims about Eskimo snow vocabulary, and it's false. There may be ways in which culture, language, and how you express yourselves might be influenced. They might influence each other in little ways, in minor ways, and that's still an issue of ongoing debate and research. So in certain ways they might influence each other, but they don't determine each other. And so this claim you've heard is false. And the kind of theory behind it, the strong form is false. It's not true that one determines the other. Where does this make a difference for you and me? Well, this could lead to ideas, or especially the strong form that says one determines the other. It could be used to make claims about people that are false, whole groups of people that are false, even kind of, even kind of racist, although maybe unintentionally. In the 1950s and the 1960s, this idea, the strong form of the idea, by the way, it's called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis or linguistic determinism. Now that's the strong form, and today nobody believes that. The weaker form, that maybe one influences the other, that's called linguistic relativism, and people are still debating and researching on that, and that's the idea of maybe in small ways, language, culture, and thought might influence each other in small ways. The strong form, the linguistic determinism, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, this is really popular a long time ago. So as an example of how it can have bad consequences. One time, I think in the 1960s, there's a linguist who is doing research. He was using this theory to do research on Chinese linguistics, and based on this theory, the strong theory, he claimed he looked at Chinese, and in Chinese, you don't have as many grammar forms for conditionals as you do in English. You don't have grammar forms that correspond exactly to the counterfactual, the non-factual, like if I were rich, I would retire to Jeju-do, or if I had studied computer science in college, I would be rich now. Regret. So that's the counterfactual or non-factual or hypothetical conditional. So yes, Chinese doesn't have exact grammar forms that correspond to that in English. They would simply use the same grammar structure. That's like if I was rich, if I studied, and such. So they don't have separate grammar forms to clearly express the counterfactual or hypothetical. So a linguist in the 1960s or early 70s, he was giving a talk at a conference, an academic conference, and he made this claim that based on this Sapir-Whorf or linguistic determinism hypothesis, that Chinese speakers cannot conceptualize conditionals as in the same way that English speakers can, that they are more limited in their expression or in how they conceptualize, conditional possibilities. Does that sound accurate? Do you think that Chinese people can't think about and understand counterfactual concepts? In the audience was a research psychologist who was Chinese. How do you think she felt? She was offended. She was angry, and rightfully so, because that kind of claim is kind of racist. It's at least very, culture-centered, very English-centered, and kind of racist. She went out and proved him wrong. She did some proper linguistic research as a psychologist, psychology and linguistic research, and it proved there was no difference. Chinese people can conceptualize these counterfactual concepts just as well as English speakers. Even if they don't express it directly in the grammar of their language, they can still understand and conceptualize counterfactual from factual conditionals. And that linguist was wrong. She proved him wrong with some good research. I'll have to find the references someday for you because that's pretty interesting. So, these kinds of cool sounding claims, they're not necessarily harmless, because sometimes things like this can lead to or justify maybe cultural bias, linguistic bias, racial bias. So these kinds of claims that are wrong, it's not just that they're wrong and they're not just harmless, they have consequences for how well we think and how we think about other people. All right, a little kind of addendum. I want to add a little bit more here about the origins of this myth about the Eskimo or Inuit vocabulary, snow vocabulary myth. It's called a Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the theory that this myth is connected to. And actually, these are two, sort of linguists. Sapir was a famous American linguistic anthropologist. He himself, I think, didn't have much to do with the theory directly. It's mainly Whorf, the guy named Whorf, who is the one who really developed and promoted this idea. I think Whorf studied under Sapir for a while, but Whorf himself was never really at least at the time, not really a properly trained linguist. He was more of an amateur linguist. This goes back to a handbook of North American Indians in 1911 by another linguist and anthropologist named Frank Boas, who was a famous linguistic anthropologist. And here, in that book, he had kind of a vague explanation about several different Eskimo snow-related terms, and he talked about different word roots, and they had different word roots for things like snow on the ground, falling snow, drifting snow, snowdrift, things like that. Which ignores the fact that they have, when it comes to snow itself, the Inuit have one basic general word for snow in their language. And these are kind of non-basic words, just like we have red for the basic color term red, but we also have more specialized words for red-related terms like wine red, blood red, burgundy, crimson red, dark red, light red, and other kinds of red. There are, hundreds and hundreds of red terms for whatever need you have. So that work ignored that kind of important, common sense fact. So this description was then kind of picked up on later by this guy named Benjamin Worf, and he was he worked for an insurance company, and at the time he was just an amateur linguist. He was kind of studying linguistics on his own at the time, and he didn't have proper training in linguistics or anthropology, but he picked up on this little fact, and he developed it more. He added to it, and he wrote an article about how the Eskimos have at least 4 to 7 different snow words: falling snow, packed snow, slushy snow, etc. Well, again, yeah, we have words for that. We have, powder, packed powder. We have slush. We have, snowstorm and blizzard and things like that. We have non-basic words for that. And those are the kinds of words that he was actually citing. But he was misrepresenting these as if they're like basic snow words. Well, his article got picked up by maybe other popular writers, magazines, and newspapers, and over time it got exaggerated and people added to it. And it became 12 words, and then 40 words, and then 100 words, and sometimes even 300 words. It's a crazy exaggeration. And a linguist named Jeffrey Pullum documents this. There's a footnote in your handout about an article he wrote called The Great Eskimo Vocabulary Hoax, in which he kind of documents how this got exaggerated and distorted, and was widely reprinted in one popular magazine or newspaper after another. And it's not true. The person promoting the belief was not a qualified linguist or anthropologist, and the magazine writers and newspaper writers picked it up not knowing, not checking the sources, and it got repeated so much that it became really impossible to check the sources unless you're a scholar and you know where to go and where to check the sources. Yet even though this false claim has been debunked, it's been proven false, it's been proven wrong, it still persists. You still hear it on the internet and in magazines and such. Why? That's a good question. Why do people want to believe this? It sounds really cool, it sounds fascinating, it sounds sensational. But you should stop and think, does it really make sense? Naturally, they would have a lot of snow-related terms, of course, but basic words for snow? Think about colors. Any language is, some languages vary in terms of very basic color terms. There's some languages with just a few basic color terms, but they will make more specialized color words when they need to, when they need words for special shades of colors. A lot of languages like English have about 12, and that's about it. That's about the limit of basic color words for most languages, about 12. Russian has an extra one. Russian has a basic word for darker blue and a basic word for light blue. But beyond that, you don't have a lot more basic color words. But of course, in any language, we can make up hundreds or thousands of specialized color terms when we need to. For people who speak Greek or Russian or Inuit or Swahili or whatever, when they're doing art, when they're painting, when they're mixing watercolors, or when they're doing web design or designing clothing or whatever. Languages can create specialized words, and so you have to be careful when you hear things like this. Just because you hear something in the news media or in the internet or in magazines, is it true? Does it really make sense? If you use common sense, is it really sensible that Eskimos or Inuit would really have that many common basic snow terms that they would use in everyday speech? Of course not. You have to for one thing, have some common sense. Think critically and carefully about these claims. So can we believe everything we hear in the news or on the internet? And I mean popular news media, commercial mass media, entertainment shows, the internet. When it comes to claims about science news, health news, language, education, your child will learn best if she hears Mozart as a baby and you teach according to her preferred learning style, learning preference, and make her memorize lots of stuff. Can we believe everything that we hear, even in commercial news media? And I want you to think about these kinds of topics and issues and think carefully. Can you believe everything that you hear? And it's especially a concern when it comes to, again, issues of education, science, health, medicine, things that we hear in popular media or on the internet. The popularity of myths, false ideas like this, maybe say something about human nature or society or education system. Why do media or the internet or popular culture keep promoting these ideas that are wrong? What are some other examples that you can think of maybe popular ideas, misconceptions regarding science, language, education, psychology, medicine, health? Why do people believe in these? Can you think of some other examples? We're going to talk about more examples throughout this semester and why these may not be so healthy. So just think about these. What do these kinds of myths, these wrong beliefs, say about us and our society and human nature? What do they say about us? What do they mean? Why do they keep persisting? Why do people keep believing in them? I'll leave you with those thoughts. So more on this later. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.